He's a young orphan from the slums who spends his days helping others. But one day a monster murders everyone he knows. So he unlocks the secret power sleeping inside him and becomes a vigilante hero. The story begins with a group of monsters known as players tossing each other around like it's some underground zoo match. Every night the city's rich and famous sneak into hidden chambers beneath the surface to satisfy their twisted cravings and place their bets on which one will come out alive. These so-called players are creatures that act purely on instinct, created only to massacre anything that crosses their path, and naturally, they never possess even the slightest trace of free will. But everything takes a turn when one night, a scientist carrying out an experiment accidentally ends up creating a player with a spark of self-awareness. That new creature sets off chaos as the monsters turn on their human spectators and 13 of them escape into the world above. In the middle of that mess, a scientist named Kanzaki abducts a rather sus child and makes a run for it. Time moves on, and it's clear the world isn't what it used to be. A couple is walking by chatting about some weird serial killer. The guy brushes it off and laughs, wondering how someone could even be sliced in half inside a train, and says it'd be pretty cool to witness something like that up close. Right then, a strange man with a frog-like tongue walks past and splits him clean in half before vanishing without leaving a single clue, while the woman breaks down screaming. When the investigation team arrives, they figure out that this was the work of the infamous Whirlwind Demon. The head of the team can't even wrap his head around how something like this could happen in broad daylight. Meanwhile, the chairman of the Imagi Corporation named Mistugai hears about the incident and starts working on his own plans to track down the kid Kanzaki took with him. Apparently, that child isn't just some ordinary boy, and Mistugai wants to seize him before the rest of the world figures out what's actually happening right beneath their feet. Years later, we see a boy named Jin talking to Kanzaki, who's now an old man. Kanzaki stops him from rushing out and tells him that he forgot his cell phone and asks if he's off to meet his friend to play superhero in the streets. Jin replies that his friend Kuga just keeps following him around on his own. But before he can leave for his part-time superhero shift, Gramps throws in one of those usual boring lectures, talking about the difference between justice and violence and how protecting someone is different from beating someone up for the heck of it. Jin argues that wounds heal up anyway if you put a bit of spit on it, just like Gramps taught him, so the old man tells him that he was talking about the wound of the heart. Jin says that he doesn't really understand it, but will keep it in his mind if it's an important lesson, and then runs off. While jumping around the neighborhood, he runs into a woman being harassed by a couple of thugs and asks her if she's in trouble. The woman states the obvious, and when she asks for help, the boy shamelessly demands 10,000 yen as payment. She agrees without hesitation, so Jin jumps down and knocks one of the men down with a flying kick to his ugly face. After that, he dodges an attack from one of the other thugs and makes him attack his buddy. Jin then uses this chance to turn around and lands a clean strike on the last thug's face and sends him flying as well. Just as the action ends, the rich brat Kuba shows up with his sister, Kanoha, yelling at Jin for not informing him when there's a crime happening. He says that they are a team and drags the guy along while Jin keeps shouting at the woman to pay up his money. Kuba tries to explain how justice isn't something you charge for, but Jin's clothes don't seem to agree with Kuba. Jin then notices a bruise on Kanoha's hand and tells her that they are matching now. He then takes off the bandage on his hand and shows the strange circle on the back of the hand and says that it's called the Angel's Ring and his Gramps told him to keep it hidden, so it's their special secret now. In the meantime, the shady frog-tongued guy from earlier is out strolling like some night stalker, minding his creepy business, when a man steps in and asks if he's had enough of the slaughter already. Instead of picking a fight, the new guy offers something more extravagant and hints at needing a bit of help. Back with Jin, the same woman from before, Akimi, somehow manages to track him down and hands over the 10,000 yen he shamelessly demanded earlier, along with a card telling him to drop by before nightfall if he wants her to treat him to dinner. Jin flashes a grin, thanks her, and rushes off to meet Gramps, only to find the slums completely covered in blood and his grandpa lying there nearly dead. Turns out Gramps never mentioned to him about this thing called death, and instead taught him that spitting on wounds would heal him. Jin tries just about that, applying saliva like butter while asking Gramps to hold on for the magic to kick in. He even argues that everyone outside just looks like they're sleeping. Gramps finally tells him they're not asleep and says it's time for his last lesson after Jin proudly shows him the money he earned. The old geezer pulls him into a tight hug, explains that this is what violence leads to, and quietly shows him the final result by collapsing to the ground and kicking the bucket. Jin quickly carries the old geezer to a nearby doctor, desperately begging him to help, but the man coldly turns him away, saying treatment doesn't come without money. Left with no other option, Jin tries calling his friend Kuga, hoping he might do something, but things don't go his way. Kuga, on the other hand, is getting chewed out by his father for hanging around a homeless kid, and before he can even respond, his father snaps his phone in half. With every option slipping out of reach, Jin ends up taking the corpse to Akimi. The two of them rush over to Central General Hospital, where Detective Sayama takes over, setting the body off for an autopsy and confirming that Kanzaki was murdered by the same Whirlwind Demon. The detective then pulls Jin aside for a private talk. Realizing that the kid has just lost the only real family he had, Akemi quietly offers to let him stay at her place for the night. She brings him home, tosses his clothes into the washing machine, and takes him straight to the bathroom to scrub away every last bit of that slum-covered mess clinging to him. She even helps him settle down, letting him cry out all his negative emotions. Meanwhile, news about Kanzaki Goro finally being spotted reaches Mr. Guy, who's seen standing in front of some hideous creature being put together. The officers report to him that the police have taken custody of the body, and that Kanzaki had been living under the fake identity of a homeless old man going by the name John Doe. Mr. Guy then asks about the boy, calling him Zet, and the officers lay out the entire situation for him in detail. The next morning, Akemi gets Jin dressed up and takes him out shopping. But on their way back, things take a dark turn when the long-tongued monster ambushes them and stabs Akemi straight in the stomach. She starts bleeding heavily but still tries to reach her phone, which the monster destroys right in front of her, clearly wanting to toy with them. Akemi tells Jin to run and let her handle it as a decoy, but he flat out refuses, saying he can't just stand there and watch her die. He puts himself between her and the monster and ends up getting stabbed by the tongue. The monster lifts him like dead weight and hurls him aside, and that's when Jin realizes this is the same creature that took Gramps away from him. Just as the monster moves in to finish the job, Akemi steps in and tackles it, saving Jin for the moment. She checks on him, but the monster slashes her face brutally, leaving her drenched in blood. The splatter hits Jin hard and snaps him awake, right as the creature begins to shapeshift into a lizard-like monster. He charges at Jin again, but this time the boy grabs his tongue barehanded and stops him mid-air before landing a savage counterattack. Out of nowhere, Jin starts radiating aura like he walked out of a Dragon Ball episode and launches himself at the creature, transforming into Zetman in the process. After a brutal showdown, Jin collapses and blacks out from the toll it takes on him. That's when the man from earlier, Haitani, makes another appearance. This time, he's joined by a second figure dressed in cloaks who questions what he's doing there. Haitani casually walks off, leaving cleanup to the new guy. Apparently, both of them are players and follow a rule that says they shouldn't interfere with humans. But it looks like the lizard broke that rule, and now someone has to deal with the mess. Jin eventually finds himself back at the hospital with Detective Sayama, who hands him a small keepsake from his Gramps, reminding him to keep his head high no matter how bad things get. The detective then starts talking about something called hope, and when Jin bluntly asks what that even means, Sayama simply opens a door to reveal Akemi, wrapped in bandages but still managing to fake a smile at him. The story then shifts over to another player who's out there unleashing chaos and setting buildings on fire. That's when Haitani shows up, asking if the guy seriously couldn't hold himself back for once. The fire guy just smirks and says he can't stand the ridiculous rules of evil. Much like what he did with the lizard freak earlier, Haitani makes him an offer to actually do something useful with all that destructive power. As the fire incidents start blowing up across the news, Kumba watches it all and gets way too fired up about becoming justice himself. Meanwhile, his father is stuck in a conference room going on about plans for rebuilding the Undertown and insisting that Tokyo just doesn't feel complete without it. Before stepping out, Cabe reminds him not to forget about the event happening tonight at the Amage Grand Hotel. Back at the slums, Kaminoha is busy handing out free meals to the homeless dudes when a man named Duke bumps into Toku and spills his food, which instantly sparks a fight between the two. As Kanoma tries to stop them, she ends up falling, and just when one of the slum dwellers is about to hit her, Jin jumps in, warning the guy to back off. He then tries to talk some sense into the group, telling them not to waste the kindness they're being shown. As he turns to leave, Konoha catches a glimpse of the angel ring on his hand and immediately realizes that he's Jin. Before walking away, Jin throws her a quick compliment for her selfless work. Konoha's mom quietly asks if that's the same boy from back then. Once the food distribution wraps up, a worker from Amaji shows up and asks both of them to attend the upcoming event. Meanwhile, Jin reaches his auntie's stall, which honestly looks more like a failed side hustle than a business. Jin suggests getting a part-time job to help out, but Akemi shuts that down with a quick beating and reminds him he's supposed to focus on his education instead. Back at his lab, director Mr. Guy stays locked in his obsession with creating a new Zet, but the experiment ends in failure once again. No matter how much they try, all they ever end up with are incomplete players that come nowhere near what Zet is. The director vents his frustration at one of his employees, questioning how they keep falling short even though they have all of Kanzaki's data. The employee calmly replies that maybe it's time to stop chasing imitations and start searching for the real thing, explaining that Kanzaki's data alone simply isn't enough to replicate someone like Jin. The next day at the Junior Soccer League Championship, Kuga ends up being the star of the match, earning all the spotlight as the hero of the game. A reporter shows up to get a quick interview with him. But right then, director Mr. Guy arrives, and even though he's technically Konoha's grandfather, his presence still sends a chill down her spine. After that awkward reunion, the old man makes his way over to Kuga. During the interview, instead of celebrating his win, Koopa shifts the conversation toward the recent string of arson attacks, urging the public to come forward with any information and vowing to catch whoever's behind it. When the reporter asks what he wants to be when he grows up, Kuga confidently says he wants to be an ally of justice, which instantly sets off a wave of laughter through the crowd like he just said he wanted to be the Wizard King in Black Clover. Later on, Konoha tells her brother that she ran into Jin earlier, and that small detail ends up giving Kuga a big boost of confidence before he heads off with his team to begin patrol and hunt the monster down. Meanwhile, Jin has already ditched his auntie's place and rushed off on his own to confront the fire culprit face to face. Back in his patrol vehicle, Kuga applies fireproof gel all over himself, insisting that he will have to walk straight into the flames. Meanwhile, Jin picks up on a foul stench and follows it straight to the fire-wielding villain before jumping into a fight. The monster quickly morphs into his player form and charges at Jin. When Jin asks if the smell is coming from him, the guy smugly replies that they both stink the same and continues launching attacks one after another. Kuga arrives at the scene and uses a tool that clears the smoke all around. He comes across Jin, who greets him, and together they find a group of children and their mother stuck in the fire. Kuga suggests they leave the mother behind and just save the kids, but Jin disagrees and uses a futon to create a way out for everyone, mentioning how hard life can be for orphans. Kuga hesitates, thinking the idea won't work, but in the end they manage to get the whole group out safely. Meanwhile, the lava dude keeps pushing Jin into a tight corner as the fight continues. The lava dude drives his hand straight through Jin's chest, and just when he thinks he's won, the ring on Jin's hand activates, triggering his transformation into Zet. The fire monster freezes for a second and calls him charismatic, but Zet doesn't give him much time to react and starts landing heavy blows. The player tries to regenerate by pulling flames from around him and attempts a desperate fire blast, but Zet takes him down using nothing but a regular fire extinguisher, realizing how useful Kuga's toys actually are. Jin finishes the fight by slashing straight through the monster's heart, ending it clean before turning back into his human form. Konoha sees him collapsing in the middle of the scorched battleground and rushes forward, but the firefighters arrive and carry him off to the hospital. At the hospital, a press conference is in full swing while Kuga gets into an argument with his father, Shizu. The chairman steps in calmly and tells Kuga to stay away from situations like these. When Kuga insists that he wants to fight for justice, the old geezer replies that justice isn't something so clear-cut and advises him to gain some actual authority first. Meanwhile, Konoha breaks down in tears as she hugs her mom and tells her that Jin has the angel's ring. Her grandfather overhears it and immediately realizes that Jin is the one he's been looking for. Without wasting time, the old man visits the unconscious boy and traps him inside a nightmare. Suddenly, Jin's thoughts snap back to the throwback moments where Akemi gets rejected from yet another job interview and says she'll probably never land anything again because she's old and her ugliness scares men away. But Jin admits he honestly enjoys living with her no matter how broke she is. Meanwhile, Kuga is busy getting jacked back at his mansion while ranting about how his father exploits his fame to sell gear instead of giving him the credit he deserves for saving the whole family like an actual hero. Kuga's mind also drifts to one of their best tag team wins when they stop a scummy purse snatcher with Jin's help. But then Jin shamelessly asks the shaken victim for a reward right after, proving they clearly follow different kinds of grind mindsets. Back at the lab, some crusty old geezers observe Zed awakening inside Jin and report the situation to Kanzaki, who watches while some man who belongs on a watch list goes off on his lady right in front of him. That makes him so angry that his Zetman instincts wake up for a second, and Jin lets out a powerful blast that sends the ugly creep flying. Seeing his dual-color skin, the racist scientists are outraged he still has some black on him, and they note his energy is peak even while the player keeps smashing him into the ground non-stop like he's pounding mochi, mocking him for being pathetic. Jin eventually stands up fully annoyed and tells him to shut it before he lands one clean punch to the gut that instantly knocks him out. As he turns around and looks at his horrendous appearance, the scientists note that his Zet power is tanking after beating the player. Watching himself become a monster, Jin boils with rage, smashes the glass window, and asks the geezers to spill why they murdered his precious Akemi. Just then, he hears her voice, and seeing her makes his Zetman form unstable, so Kanzaki orders the team to quickly return him to human form before it's too late. The old men realize his Zet cells don't revert until there are no players left, and his body reacts to Akemi, just like players. Seeing Jin cry and simp over her, the chairman figures he won't pull the trigger, so someone else fires the shots. Jin turns to retaliate, but Kanzaki laughs, knowing his plan works perfectly and brings Jin even closer to becoming human. Back at home, Kuba is watching his anime when Konoha pops in and asks where Jin is because she wants to return his necklace. Kuba doesn't know, but he rants to her about their father milking his fame for profit while he just wants to become someone like Alphys from the anime, but his yapping about wanting to be a perfect superhero annoys her, and just as she tries to leave the room, he suddenly bear hugs her and says she's the only one who understands him. But Konoha shatters his ego and says he can go on about justice all he wants, but all she sees is someone desperate for attention. Back at Imagilabs, the old men show up at Jin's cell. sedate him to keep him under control, and drag him deep underground into a sealed-off ancient Amagi facility where monsters apparently used to roam. They stop in front of a strange gate marked by the same ring as his hand, and the chairman calls it the Ring of Exposure, which supposedly forces monsters back into their true form. Mitsugai openly confesses that his company created them, and Jin gets furious, because that means he caused both Akemi and his father's deaths. Jin bites down to end himself, but his body collapses from the ring's effect as the gate unlocks. Inside the facility, the chairman admits he allowed his company to create monsters who were unleashed for the elite's entertainment and to rake in huge profits, but after things spiraled and the players escaped, Ian Kanzaki designed Jin as the ultimate hunter to clean up their mess. Jin learns that his father later regretted the planned flood to raise him as a normal person instead, which makes him reject their offer completely, but the old man warns him that a player could now go after Akemi, the one person he still treasures. They casually reveal she's alive and well at her shop, and that the ones he saw die were just clones built by their lab. Before Jin steps out of the car, the chairman stops him and tells him he can never meet those he cares for again, since players will now hunt them down, which leaves Jin with tears in his eyes. Akemi senses he's somewhere nearby, but misses the car before spotting Konoha instead. While they talk about him, Akemi hands over his necklace to her, believing Konoha has the best chance of finding him first. Meanwhile, the chairman asks Jin if he's ready to leave his humanity behind and embrace full Zetman mode in his final red form. Jin agrees only if they make Akemi hot again and reunite with her son. 2 years go by, and Detective Sayama comes across a severed hand at a crime scene with bubbles pouring out of it, which instantly makes him wonder if this case will also collect dust like the last one. Later on, he bails Jin out of jail again and tells him straight up to stop putting people in the hospital, and outside, Jin spots the guy he saved and instantly demands 10 grand for him like it's just business as usual. Sayama pulls him aside and tells him to stop beating up thugs since he's tired of cleaning up the mess each time, and then the two still share a weirdly wholesome father-son vibe. Meanwhile, in a nearby alley, a player melts some poor guy into bubbles using his powers, and as Hanako walks past and sees the scene, she freezes in horror. One of the guys runs after her, but she manages to outsmart him, and the young guy watching tells the guard not to interfere and let the situation play out naturally, which makes the guard wonder when Jin will actually reach the final form he promised. Back then, they gave him a suit and some gum to trigger his Zet cells, but it all failed, so the young man just tells him to keep watching quietly. That's when they spot the chairman's wife and Konoha doing public volunteer work. On the other hand, Koopa finds himself surrounded by a group of sweaty nerds who proudly show off all the tech and gadgets they built for their so-called Alley of Justice, and once he finally escapes their endless bootlicking, he spots Hayami waiting outside. Upon the rooftop, Hayami tells him the recent incidents have been going down ever since his big rescue during the arson attack, but Koopa still feels awful when he remembers his sister's harsh words about how he is only thirsty for attention. Hayami quickly tells him to quit overthinking because he is already using the family's high-grade military tech to craft him an actual superhero suit. Back in the neighborhood, Jin walks past Konoha while people around her start praising him, saying no villains have shown up since he arrived, and she thinks to herself that sounds exactly like the Jin she remembers. Seeing her dumb and in love, Konoha's mother tells to get some action while she handles the charity, and when she finally meets him after 2 years, Jin tells her to keep helping people and walks off. But when she brings up Akemi and his parents, he coldly tells her to stop being an eyesore, as he remembers the chairman's advice to avoid his loved ones and walks off like a Chad. Back at his apartment, Jin walks in to find a pair of Jigglypuffs at the entrance and politely stomps on them like a gentleman. He tells Hanako to get out, but takes it back after she tells him about the Bubble Man. At the same time, Konoha tells Kuga she found Jin again, but he isn't interested and lets her know he doesn't want to see him till he's stronger. Meanwhile, Hanako keeps incessantly nagging Jin with questions, but the Chad ignores her and tells her to get out after she's done eating. Suddenly, he senses a player and runs out, and the guards focus all their cameras on him until they see the girl come out of his department and head to where she dropped her bag. The moment she bends over, Bubble Man's lackey appears and she falls after a sad attempt to fight back. The gang surrounds her and the guy thinks about all the fun things they will do while the guards finally figure out Jin ran out chasing after them. They watch his Zep meter as he approaches them menacingly Jotaro style and offers to save Hanako for 10 grand. Bubble Man's lackey calls him stingy for being a greedy hero, so Jin politely replies with his fist before homing in on Bubble Man, whose froth melts his clothes. While the second man takes Hanako hostage, Jin one-shots the clown and asks the second man if they are all players. As Jin walks in to claim his 10 grand, Bubble Man suddenly appears and roundhouse kicks him out of existence. Seeing Jin channel his inner Zet, a sniper immediately knocks Hanako out cold with his dart, and even though the guy warns Bubble Man not to transform because the sweeper will come and execute him breaking the rules, Bubble Man shifts to his true form anyway. Jin pulls out his Zet gum in response. While his gang tries to run before the sweepers show up, Bubble Man charges in thinking he's about to land a clean finish and beats Jin down hard enough to boost his Zet cells fast. He drives his spike straight into Jin's chest to melt him, but Jin still manages to blow his head off through the agony. Foam keeps pouring out of the bubble man's body, causing some serious damage, and that instantly fills his Zet meter. The chairman joins the guards as things get interesting, and they watch Jin pummel the giant guy going albino mode, but the meter goes even further beyond as he continues beating him up. As the meter hits over 100%, the chairman foams at the mouth, thinking he will finally see Zetman's final form. After Jin obliterates his enemy, the chairman is confused, seeing that Jin is too white and the numbers aren't turning red, and he still hasn't turned human, meaning there are still players around. Suddenly, the alarm goes off as Jin's body starts breaking down, so the chairman sends his men to hunt them down. But the creepy spider freak laughs, thinking they will never find him until a sweeper shows up and stabs him for breaking the rules. After that, the Zet meter finally goes down and Jin becomes human again, but before he can take Hanako back in, the sweeper lightly pokes his sword into his spine. The reaction Jin shows after getting stabbed with the sword seems strange enough to throw the sweeper off completely. At the same time, the live camera feed Guy had been using to monitor everything suddenly gets cut off by Haitani. The sweeper starts questioning who this Jin guy actually is, since he doesn't seem like a regular human or even a proper player. Haitani steps in and tells him that the kid is called Zet, and warns that if he ends up accidentally killing him, their boss won't take it lightly. That only adds to Jin's confusion, prompting him to ask who this guy even is and what boss he keeps talking about. Haitani replies that he's been waiting a long time for Jin to grow up and tells him to stop using the word player since he prefers the term evil. Jin, however, couldn't care less and still calls him a player, then demands to know what exactly he knows about him. Just then, the director's men arrive at the scene and the evil guy disappears without leaving a trace. Worried about Jin's condition, the director decides to drop by earlier than planned just to check on him. He tells Jin that seeing the sweeper's light was enough to send everyone into panic. When Jin asks who that guy was, the director explains that the sweeper's main job is to wipe out any players who go through regression. There's a strict rule that requires them to live as humans and quietly blend into society, and anyone who breaks that gets eliminated. Jin then mentions that there was another person with the sweeper, which instantly makes both the director and Hayami visibly uneasy. Meanwhile, at Konoha's school, the girl looks like a nervous wreck as her friend teasingly asks if she's fallen for someone. Konoha excuses herself and heads off for swimming practice. Back at Jin's place, Hanako wakes up from her nap and suddenly gets hit with a splitting migraine. She walks over to where Jin is busy cooking and asks him for a glass of water so she can take her medicine. Once they finish the meal, she quietly heads to the shower. Just in time, Jin manages to remove the hidden camera that was secretly placed in the bathroom to monitor him, but Hanako completely misunderstands the situation and thinks he was trying to peek at her. Meanwhile, Kuga visits a suspicious location where Hayami tells him this is a highly confidential project that even Shizu has no idea about. Hayami reminds him to keep everything a secret and not let anything slip to his father, then proudly reveals a combat suit he refers to as Alphys, inspired by the one from the television show. At first, the room is filled with excitement, including Kuga, but that doesn't last long. The second he realizes the suit looks nothing like the original, he completely loses it and demands a redesign. He insists that if they are going to call it Alphys, then it should actually resemble the real one, and tells them to change the colors, add a cape, and make it look right, because his inner fan just cannot handle a version that feels this off. While Kuga is on his way back home, the mysterious player appears and asks if he's an Amaji. He calls himself a fan but refuses to share his identity. The strange man then offers to help Kuga become a real hero and gives him a test with two choices. He says Kuga can either rush to save his sister, claiming she's about to drown, or go with him to rescue 3 girls who will die if he chooses otherwise. The idea of abandoning his sister leaves Kuga frozen in fear, and without another word, he rushes straight to the pool. When he gets there, all he finds is Konoha calmly doing her usual swimming practice. That same day, the 3 girls the man mentioned are reported dead. Later that evening at an Evil's bar, the Sangshei man is seen handing over money to Konoha's teacher, who insists she just wants to live a normal life as a regular teacher. One of the players at the bar brings up how the failures who revert and go around killing people are putting all of them at risk, and the tension sparks a fight between the two. But another player steps in and cools things down, reminding everyone that they all just want to live quietly and avoid getting involved with humans, which is exactly what their boss expects from them. The next day, while Kuga is watching the news and learning about the murder of the 3 girls, he suddenly receives a call from the same eerie geezer. The man coldly tells him that he has failed the test and adds that they'll meet again for the next one. Kuga rushes over to Hayami, hoping to take action, but Hayami tells him that for now, all they can do is observe the man, since there's nothing else that can be done. Later that day, a couple of players wander the streets, itching to kill humans just for the thrill of it, when Haitani shows up out of nowhere and stops them in their tracks. He tells them that the evil needs to come up with a proper way to take control of the world and starts messing with their heads by feeding them promises. He encourages them to go all out and eliminate Jin, assuring them that the sweeper won't get in their way this time. Once they take off, the same strange geezer from before, who overhears the entire conversation, steps out and confronts Haitani. He questions his intentions, asking why he keeps pushing players to murder and also not to murder, almost like he's playing both sides for his own amusement. At the same time, Jin steps out to grab some food since the new freeloader at his place somehow managed to clear out the entire fridge. The freeloader tags along while Jin realizes he left his activation gun back at home. As they walk past an alley, Kanama happens to spot a girl clinging to her crush, and the sight quietly breaks her heart. When Jin notices her and asks if she came looking for him, he scolds her and tells her never to come near him again. But as he walks away, something feels off and he quickly rushes back to check on her, only to find himself face to face with a player who immediately asks if he's Zet. The player threatens to kill the two high schoolers if Jin doesn't choose to die first, leaving him frozen in fear. Within seconds, the player begins to regress into his monstrous form, while Jin desperately remembers that he forgot his activation gum. Back at the shady facility, Koopa finally gets to see that his suit has been completed, and just as he's about to celebrate, he receives a call from his sister. The fear in her voice instantly sets off alarms in his head, and without wasting another second, he jumps into the prototype Alpha's suit and heads straight out to rescue her. At the same time, Jin tries to stall long enough for his transformation to kick in and demands the player tell him where his brothers are, and the guy just laughs, saying the filthy creep is probably out there making high school girls squeal like the degenerate he is. Hearing that, Jin snaps and launches himself into battle, but the blowback sends him flying and he quickly realizes how powerless he still feels. His whole body screams and his mind burns, but something deep inside the urge to protect keeps him from backing down. The Amaji scientists observe the scene and notice his Zet meter crawling upward, but when one of the guards tries to bring him the gum, the chairman stops them because he wants to see how far Jin can go on his own. Meanwhile, the lobster freak taunts Jin, warning that if he doesn't transform soon, one of the girls might just get diddied, and the second he tries to give the signal, the mystery attacker crashes into the scene from above like a bomb. Somewhere else, the lobster's filthy brother plays with Kanova's body before revealing his face her family created, which terrifies her, and then he cuts her neck just to watch the blood flow. Back near Jin, Red Lobster creeps closer and says there's still time to save the girls, and right as Jin feels his heart thump with purpose, he grabs a rod from the ground and drives it into the crustacean's chest, and then leaps back using his minimum Zet power. As the lobster begins to recover, Haitani appears out of nowhere and warns him not to underestimate what Jin is capable of, but the monster refuses to fall back. While Jin makes his way forward, the crusty creep continues harassing Konoha like a predator on a playground. Meanwhile, at Jin's apartment, Hanako thinks about how miserable her life used to be, how her deadbeat dad and her annoying Karen of a mom made home feel like hell. But living with Jin now, she realizes she might have caught real feelings. She steps into the shower, hoping to rinse off her naughty thoughts, and remembers she forgot to take her medicine, and right then, the creepy crawlers knock at the door. Elsewhere, Jin reaches the building where he senses the monster and steps inside cautiously. Everything feels too quiet, but when he sees Konoha restrained, he quickly frees her. She lights up just seeing him, but just as he scoops her up into his arms to leave, a tentacle shoots out from the shadows from the degenerate who was waiting to ambush him. Jin tries to fight back, but the freak throws him around like he's a basketball. And right as he walks over to finish the job, the vile creature and his babies get blasted into pieces by laser beams, and Justice Man lands heroically while delivering his iconic speech. When he hears Jin's voice, Kuba can't believe it's really him. Jin quickly tells him there's no time and Konoha needs urgent help, so Kuba calls his team for an ambulance and asks if he can send 3 passengers to his hangar, but they say it can barely carry 2 girls because it was only built to only carry alphas. Kuba refuses to abandon Jin, but Hayami tells him he must and gives him a cold ethical dilemma that sounds exactly like the one the geezer from Evil once asked. While he's frozen by the choice, Kuba hears Jin tell him to forget about him. After wrestling with his sense of justice, Kuba sends the girls off and tells Jin he hasn't changed at all. Jin replies that instead of yapping, he should go fight the rest of the monsters. With that, Kuba exits and Jin struggles his way down the stairs into the shelter below, where the homeless residents reveal they know how hard he's been fighting for them, and now it's finally their turn to protect him. After that, they tell him to sit back and relax as the baby lobsters come from the player before surrounding them. Mitsugai's men ask him to let them intervene, but he says Jin has to awaken, and right before the lobsters cut the homeless crew in half, Alphys comes in and saves the day. As Jin curses his pathetic self, Haitani gives him a rude visit and says he knows Jin became Zet the last time he was on the verge of death, but at his new level needs a powerful stimulus. After introducing himself as his secret admirer from Evil, he strips Jin down and whips out a big white rod, saying it is a stake made from fragments of the Ring of Exposure. Without hesitation, he drives it straight into Jin's chest, making him scream as the pain sears through him. His body violently shifts as he transforms into Zet Man. This time, though, his aura explodes outward as red lightning pulses from his chest. Haitani enjoys watching Jin finally unlock his final form like a creepy stalker. The energy blast nukes the surroundings, and scientists lose it as his Zet meter skyrockets past 100%. As Jin finally transforms into his long-awaited red form, he feels his body heating up fast, and it becomes clear that his stats have gone way beyond the usual Zet level. Meanwhile, Kuga manages to hold his ground against the cockroach guy until the player fully regresses and starts pushing him into a tough corner. Back to Jin, he ends up facing Isono, another player who starts getting nervous, wondering if the red guy standing in front of him is really Zet. Jin's ring of resonance activates and reacts with the player, forcing Isono to complete his regression. As Jin begins to pound him into the ground, Haitani shows up and tells Jin to finish the job, explaining that Isono has broken the rules of evil and is now nothing but an outcast who gets a thrill out of hunting humans. Haitani even adds that this guy had some pretty twisted plans for Hanako, which clearly pushes Jin over the edge. Isono tries to protest, but before he can say much, Zet beats him down. The monster makes a last-ditch attempt to escape by transferring himself into his offspring, but Jin ends it completely by wiping him out. After the fight, Jin demands to know who Haitani really is, pointing out how he used one of his own without even blinking. Haitani calmly responds that he's not like the rest of them and says he's a special kind of evil. When Jin tries using his ring to force a regression on him, Haitani warns that doing that would only land Jin in serious trouble. Jin tries to grab him, but Haitani vanishes before he can even get close. Meanwhile, back at the evil bar, the bartender gets word that Red Zet has made an appearance. He remarks that Isono and the others have already done enough damage to risk exposing their whole kind and gives the order to bring Haitani in. Amidst all the chaos, Hayami and the Image team notice that Kuba's suit is running low on energy, and they decide it's time to lift his spirits by updating him about his sister's condition. Kume hesitates for a second and ends up taking a solid hit, which only causes the Alpha suit to lose even more power. The team immediately connects to him and informs him that Konoha has been safely moved to the hospital, and thanks to his efforts, the two girls were rescued. Hearing this gives Kuga a much-needed boost, and he gets back on his feet. Zed arrives on the scene, and Kuga notices the ring on his hand, quickly figuring out that the Red Warrior standing before him is actually Jin, though the whole thing still feels a bit surreal. Feeling cornered by Zed's appearance, the cockroach guy starts producing more of his offspring, trying to outnumber them and survive. Zed and Kuga decide to team up just like the old days, and Jin explains to him that this shrimp-looking player has the ability to transfer himself into his spawns, meaning they'll have to wipe them all out in one go, kind of like taking down those moon demons from Demon Slayer. Just as the fight is about to start, the shrimp guy questions Jin, asking why he chooses to fight alongside humans when he clearly belongs with the players. He mocks him, calling him a servant and a tool being used by humans. But Jin stands his ground and says that he has never seen himself as anyone's slave, and he uses his powers to take down players of his own free will. As the battle starts heating up, Jin moves in to strike the shrimp guy, but suddenly freezes in place as if his body locks up on its own. Heat begins surging through him, and while he stands paralyzed, the shrimp spawns land multiple hits, stabbing him over and over until Jin ends up shifting into his white form. Meanwhile, in some cluttered old garage, the same shitty old geezer is seen talking to a kid named Ichiru. They discuss how the shrimp guy is now holding his ground against both Zet and the guy in the alpha suit. Back at the battlefield, Zet starts pushing the shrimp guy into a corner, and the two exchange some heated trash talk in between the blows. Zet and Alphas begin fighting in perfect rhythm, teaming up exactly as planned and wiping out the entire shrimp squad. Meanwhile, the Imagi Corporation continues monitoring the fight, keeping a close eye on Jin. They notice that his Zet factor, which had been rising steadily, finally begins to stabilize after the shrimp player's defeat, but to everyone's surprise, has climbed past 200. Meanwhile, back at the garage, Haitani reports to the old geezer that Zet seems a little too soft, pointing out how he showed sympathy toward Isono and the others. But the old geezer doesn't seem bothered, saying that Jin still has the potential to become the charisma they've been waiting for. Haitani then shifts the topic to Alphas, mocking him as some cosplaying kid and suggesting there are plenty of ways they could make use of someone like that. Back on the battlefield, Zet returns to his human form and starts to collapse, but Kuga manages to catch him just in time. The long-awaited reunion hits hard and brings Kuga to tears. Meanwhile, over at Imagi Corporation, the tension refuses to settle down as the Zet factor fails to drop. After the fight ends, the homeless crowd thanks Koga for saving them, and right then, Jin shows up casually carrying Hanako like a princess. The group asks for his name and invites him and his girlfriend to join them for dinner. Hearing the word girlfriend makes Hanako's face go tomato mode, while Kuba stands there crushed that Jin scored a girl before he did. Right after that, a few Imagi agents arrive and ask all three to come with them. Back at Imagi Labs, Mitsube finally reveals everything about the players and Jin's real identity to Kuga. Meanwhile, Hanako gets checked at the hospital, and the doctor, who is definitely not an undercover agent, gaslights her by saying she hallucinated everything and that the monsters she is talking about don't exist. Elsewhere inside a bar, Haitani tells a bartender who is the boss of evil that he threw the Bug brothers under the bus just to avoid beef with Red Zet. The bartender sounds disappointed that he didn't get to witness Red Zet's true potential, but still allows Haitani to keep observing him a little longer. Later that day, Kuva's father meets with Hayami and his boss to discuss making the Alpha suit behind their back, but the Sly Guy manages to convince Kuva's father that it will profit his company's image in the future. After the meeting, Hayami reveals to his boss that his plan to use Kuba's childish delusions is all for the company's sake and creepily smiles off into the sunset. The next morning, Konoha finally wakes up from her coma and Kuba talks to Jin about everything his grandfather told him and how excited he is to fight evil with his best friend by his side. But Jin makes it clear he isn't interested in teaming up. Still, Kuba shows him a drawing of Red Zet as he reveals that it was a heroic version of the devil to scare the players designed by his grandfather's scientists. And because he also designed alphas, that makes them brothers, but Jin tells him to stop treating all this like it's a game. During their chat, Jin learns his original name is Zetman, and after that they go to meet Konoha, who is really curious. But before Kuba spills too much, Jin pretends to know nothing. Outside, Kuba argues with him saying Konoha has a right to learn the truth about her family, but Jin says that ignorance is better than trauma and gets a call that Hanako is being discharged. As he heads off, the chairman gives him a warning to stop rizzing girls up unless he wants them to become targets. So when Hanako asks him to go home together, he rejects her cold and tells her to return to her family. She says she'd rather swallow Tide Pods than deal with them. But when Jin says he hates people who talk trash about family and promises to visit her later, her heart melts on the spot and she says she'll be waiting, reminding him of Akemi and Gramps. That smile lights her up, and as Konoha spies from behind the door, he says it would be nice to start a family with Hanako once his job is done. After grabbing her number, he's greeted by Kuba and the Amaji squad who are ready to move out. At the lab, Kuba asks where Jin was born while they run a series of tests on him, and Mitsugai calmly explains that Jin wasn't born, but rather he was created in a lab that no longer exists. Back then, Amaji Corporation had been experimenting with genetic coding to craft new life forms completely different from regular humans. And because they didn't have the N-word pass, they flipped it into a Z and made his name Zet. Right then, the chairman is excited to see Kanzaki active in chat after receiving signals from Jin after a solid 2 years of silence. Mitsugai tells Kuga that he was satisfied seeing that Jin was over 99% human back then. The scientists tell Mitsugai that the effects of the ring of exposure are slowly calming down, and after Jin comes out, Kuba asks him what he thinks of Zetman, because the way he sees it, his friend is being used like a tool. But Jin says the Zet life didn't choose him, he chose the Zet. Suddenly, Kanzaki's voice steals the spotlight as he asks if Jin is really there. Mitsugai tells him to go ask the old man directly what he should do once he reaches his final form. The chairman keeps talking about how they still need more info, and that Haitani might know something, but Jin is too shaken by the fact that Gramps is somehow still alive. Kanzaki then asks whether Jin reached the ring of exposure and reveals that it's still not enough. That's when Jin grabs Mitsugai by the collar and demands to be taken to see him. The chairman gives the green light and Kuba tags along as they head into a restricted area. Inside the room, they arrive at a sealed chamber and Mitsugai unlocks it with a secret code. What Jin sees inside leaves him stunned. Just before he can step any closer, the chairman holds him back, warning that he could contaminate the chamber where Kanzaki's preserved body is being kept. Then Mitsugai enters another code, revealing a dystopian robotic platform holding Grandpa's head tubes shoved into it, barely keeping him alive. With that, Mitsugai asks Jin to ask Kanzaki in person what he needs to become complete because he is the only hope humanity has against players. And while Kanzaki types out the answer in chat, Jin agrees to fulfill his duty before suddenly grabbing Kanzaki's head and yanking out all the tubes because he does not want the old man to suffer any longer. Then he walks off saying he will meet Haitani, while the scientists tell Jin Graham's final words. Jin cries manly tears of joy seeing the old man is worried if he's eating well, and when one of the scientists asks about a red stone, Kuba suddenly recalls the pendant Konoha always kept and calls his mom to ask where she might have put it. A tiny insect records their call the whole time, and somewhere else, the bug's owner grins while assembling a clone army, all prepped up to attack the Amaji mansion. Hayami finally puts his plan into motion and sends his cloned minions to storm the house. One of them follows through and sneaks into the room where Konoha is asleep. He gets close, pulls off the suit, and wakes her up while pretending to be Jin. He calmly asks her to return the pendant, claiming it's a keepsake from his old man. Right then, the Amaji Corporation shows up with the real Jin and Kuba. Kuba's mother rushes to greet them, but before anyone can process what's going on, two of the Jin lookalikes suddenly morph into White Zet, pushing the real Jin to chomp down his activation gum. Their fakes claim they were created using Jin's blood, which freaks out the old geezer and his colleague. A full-on battle kicks off, and both Kuga and Jin put on a solid performance. One of the fakes makes a move for the director, but the scientist steps in and takes the stab straight to the chest. The fake then turns on the chairman, but before things get out of hand, Jin jumps in and saves him just in time. The fake Zet clones start melting down just like the original always do from overloading, but by the time that happens, Jin has already completed his regression and wipes them out. Kuga quickly runs over to check on his sister, while Jin shifts back to his human form and heads off to find the old geezer. When he gets there, the stabbed scientist shares how he always wanted to see Jin in his true form, and right after saying that, he breathes his last. Meanwhile, Kuba reaches Konoha and finds her shaken. Jin shows up too, and the three of them manage to get out just in time before the entire mansion blows up. At Jin's request, Hanako makes an effort to patch things up with her parents, but it turns out to be a total waste since all they seem to care about is how her actions might ruin their perfect public image. As she walks off, her father casually tells her mother to let her go, sounding way too confident that she'll come running back eventually. At the hospital, the chairman brings up how they've not only lost the red stone to Haitani, but also Dr. Sugita, who literally gave up his life to protect him. Jin offers his condolences and then asks the team how Haitani even found out about the stone in the first place. The old geezer, though, seems more stressed about where Haitani is getting the funds to cook up Zet clones. Kuba slams his fist into the floor and declares that bombing their house was basically a declaration of war. He claims that Alphas will now stand by Jin's side and fight with him. Right then, Jin gets a message from Hanako, asking if she can meet him. Meanwhile, back at the Alphas base, Konoha sits scared and confused, trying to figure out why no one tells her anything or why the pendant even matters that much. She recalls the terrifying face of her grandfather and admits just how much the old geezer freaks her out. While heading out to meet Hanako, Jin runs into the bartender who calls him Zet, instantly putting Jin on high alert. The guy waves it off and says he just wants to have a friendly chat. Jin asks if he's one of Haitani's minions, but the bartender laughs it off and tells him he's got it all backwards since he's actually the daddy of evil. The so-called Big Daddy claims that he was the one who turned evil's fangs toward humanity and even morphs his arm a little into a creepy wolf-like limb, which pushes Jin to reach for his gum. But just before he can bite down, the sweeper shows up from behind and pokes Jin in the back with his blade. The evil's master calmly apologizes for the whole bombing mess, claiming that Haitani's been going rogue and acting on his own. He calls the guy a full-blown nuisance to both humans and evil, dragging everyone into chaos for his own twisted fun. Then, completely out of nowhere, the Big Daddy drops a wild claim that evil is actually a peaceful bunch, grateful to humanity for giving birth to them, and that they've been searching for a way to live side by side ever since. But with Haitani causing all this trouble, even evil can't handle him anymore, which is why the boss wants Jin's help. And since Jin doesn't exactly have better options, he agrees, saying Haitani has been bugging him too. Back at the Alpha's secret base, Kuba is busy getting his already nerfed Halloween costume upgraded and even asks for a flying feature to be added, though the team pushes back, saying that might be a bit of a headache. Right then, someone barges in, yelling that Kuba's sister has run off somewhere. Meanwhile, Jin makes it back to Hanako, only to get a pillow chucked straight at his face before she suddenly gets all lovey-dovey. Jin doesn't mind though and promises to protect her no matter what. At the same time, Kuba receives a call from the old geezer who claims he knows where Konoha is. Suited and booted like a king, Kuba gets ready in the lab to go save Konoha and tells the team to make sure his mom knows he loves her, just in case things go sideways. Hayami warns him that it's obviously a trap, but Kuba says he doesn't care. Meanwhile, after spending some steamy naughty time with Hanako, Jin opens up about his dream of starting a family with her someday, but right in the middle of that moment, Kuga interrupts and tells him he's heading out to the meetup point to confront Jiru. With his mirrored squad tracking his location, Kuga gets into the car with a shady old man and asks if this is just another one of his twisted tests. But before he gets a real answer, the scheming geezer knocks him out with some spray. The moment Kuga's team loses his signal, they contact Hayami back at base to figure out what's happening, but the guy plays dumb, even though he's the one who secretly planted the virus at the same time. Jin gets ready to leave and promises Konoha that once all of this is over, he'll tell her everything. Later, Kuga wakes up in some unfamiliar hotel room and hears Jiru's voice through an earpiece, telling him that his next test is about to begin, leaving him alone with nothing but a gun. Kuga gets pissed and demands to see his sister, but Jiru just laughs, saying he never had her and that it was stupidly easy to trick someone like him. Still, he plays with his mind and leaves a sliver of doubt, making Kuga believe Konoha might still be here, then opens the door to the first test. After sneaking through the hallways like James Bond, Kuga opens a door and finds a room full of girls having a really fancy party. He hides his gun quickly, while the girls gush about their favorite idol, and Jiru explains that the first test is about whether he chooses his sister or the 100 potential girlfriends in front of him, slyly warning that things didn't end so well the last time he chose family. As Kuga panics, a girl asks him for an autograph to sell it, but he excuses himself to the bathroom to think and wonders if Konoha might actually be here. On his way back, another girl says something feels off and forcefully drags him to a secret door she found, which causes a wall in the ballroom to slide open and reveal a love hotel room. Kuba hesitates to follow her, But when one of his fangirls mentions the room too, he figures the obvious path might be a trap, so just like Jin would, he decides to use the hidden exit to save everyone at once. Being a true ally of justice, Kuga tells the girl to run outside and call the police while he goes back to help the rest of the girls escape. But when he returns, one of them drags him into a room right before a giant cinder block comes crashing down from above and splatters her into tomato juice. The gruesome sight sends the entire group into a panic, and the gold digger girl slaps Kuba across the face while blaming him for betraying them. But the pink-haired girl calls her a big fat meanie and says she still believes in Kuba no matter what. Eventually, the locked door opens and the girls charge out like a horde of zombies. But the pink-haired girl gets left behind and takes the other exit instead. Meanwhile, Kuga and the others freeze in their tracks when a giant mecha appears before them, and Jiru offers him two choices. Either he can take the elevator and abandon the girls, or defeat Hammerman and save every single one of them like a hero. Without hesitation, Kuga makes the obvious pick, pulls out his weapon and chooses to fight for justice. Seeing the predictable fool fall for his trap, Jiru gives Haitani the green light to kick off his plan. Back at Akimi's place, Konoha tells her she doesn't trust anyone anymore because no one seems willing to tell her the full truth. But Akimi gently reassures her that no matter what, she can always count on Jin. Just then, every screen across the city flickers black as Haitani appears and commands the world's attention. He introduces himself as a member of Evil and tells all the players watching to revert and announce exactly what they stand for in 4K. Suddenly, players start revealing themselves in public and chaos erupts as hell breaks loose in the city. Akimi tries to change the channel while Konoha curls up in fear. Jin calls her and asks if she's seen the broadcast and if Konoha is with her. He tells her to keep the girl safe if she shows up and takes off without delay. Meanwhile, Jiru watches Kuba struggle to save a handful of girls while monsters tear through the city, and Haitani makes it clear his plan is all about revenge on the greedy humans who created them for profit. Back in the hotel, Jiru tells Kuba, who's in a midlife crisis, he'll never save anyone because his dream of justice has one huge fatal flaw. While Haitani keeps revealing secrets about the players to the humans, Jin chews on his regression gum and rushes over to save the crowd. He reaches the scene and quickly takes down the regressed players, asking everyone to leave right away. Meanwhile, someone sneaks into the place where Hanako is and quietly takes her captive. Back in the city, Haitani throws all the blame on the Amethysts, claiming they are the ones who created the players and caused this whole mess. On the other hand, Kuga is barely managing to stay in the fight, though he seems to enjoy going head-to-head with the machine monster and soon realizes that it is actually a player. After bringing it down, Jiru's sun starts shaking and the old man tells Kuga that he has failed the test. Kuga begs him to release the girls, and when Jiru agrees, Kuga tells everyone to run for it. While most of them now look at Kuga like he is the villain, the same girl who once called him a murderer starts seeing him as a hero. Just when they are about to leave, lasers suddenly fire from all sides and everyone is brutally murdered, leaving Kuga in a complete panic. At that moment, one of the girls who had a crush on him appears from behind and gently asks him to come along with her. Even though Kuga can tell this might be a trap, he still chooses to follow her. Meanwhile, back in the city, after taking care of the players, Jin reverts to his human form right there in the open, which instantly freaks everyone out. Instead of seeing him as their savior, all the humans start panicking like he's just another monster. To calm things down, Officer Sayama steps in and takes our boy into custody. Watching the news, Akimi comments that she's never liked the Amethysts, though she admits that Konoha seems to be an exception. Akimi brings up how the Amethysts offered a huge amount of money to fix her face, but she turned it all down without a second thought. Meanwhile, the story shifts back to Kuga, who tracks down Jiru and immediately pulls out his gun, only for the girl who led him there to snatch it away and force him to walk toward Jiru at gunpoint. The old man finally introduces himself as Nakata Jiru and names the child with him as Ichiru. He then tells Kuga how he completely failed the test because of his messed up view of justice. Jiru points out how Kuga uses justice as an excuse to satisfy his craving for battle and to play the hero, exposing how he was clearly having the time of his life fighting the machine monster instead of worrying about the girls. Just then, something starts going wrong with the old geezer and his son quickly rushes to give him some medicine. The kid reveals that he's actually a bug player, and both father and son blame Kuga's dad for everything. The geezer explains how he had no choice but to do all of this just to bring his son back to life. He confesses that he created the players under Sezu's orders, but the moment those monsters started gaining awareness, he tried to warn the public about the danger. That's when Kuga's father sealed him and his son alive inside the underground building. Trapped in the lab and desperate, he fused his nearly dead son with a player using the tech available. Ever since, all he's wanted is revenge for what they went through. He admits that it was Haitani who found them later, and how the players have been helping them ever since, offering a shot at revenge by teaming up with anyone willing to bring down the Amethysts. He asks Kuga to kill his father with his own hands, and when Kuga asks what good that would do, the guy makes it clear that vengeance is all he wants. At that moment, Hayami walks in, and the girl puts a gun to her own head, being controlled by Jiru's son, threatening to kill herself if Kuga does anything rash. Kuga then learns that Hayami has his own agenda and wants control of the Imagi group, working together with Jiru. Meanwhile, Kuga's father begins an interview on live television, spewing lies about the players and acting like none of it is real. But then his own right-hand man, Cabe, turns out to be siding with Hayami and exposes the truth about the players to the public. After dropping the bomb, Cabe gets taken over by Jiru's son and ends his own life to make the truth stick. Still, none of it moves Kuga's father, who coldly dismisses Cabe as just another madman. Jiru then plans to use a bug to control Kogetsu, but Hayami stops him, claiming that Kuga will go through with it on his own because that's what Hiro does. That's when Kuga snaps, reclaims his gun, shifts it into blade mode, and slashes through Hayami before turning the gun back on Jiru and his son, shooting them down. As Hayami crumbles, he mutters that a puppet should have stayed one, but Kuga puts him down while shaking all over. He then picks up the girl and carries her back to the surface, just as the Imagi van pulls up right on time. Meanwhile, White Zet shows up at the spot where the president and Haitani are, but before anything can happen, Haitani rushes straight at him and drives his hand right through the guy's body, telling him that without the red stone, he's just another useless failure. Outside, Kuga puts on his updated alpha suit, and once the fat nerd reaches his limit, he instantly feels his power skyrocket. After apologizing to his fangirl, he blasts off to the top while Konoha also leaves Akimi's place to settle things once and for all. Meanwhile, Jin fights through the pain and gives Haitani a death stare, but Haitani enjoys seeing the eyes of a monster, and then pulls something out of Jin's chest, which causes Jin's transformation to crumble as he collapses helplessly onto the ground. Haitani raises the blood-red stake he yanked out of Jin and stomps on his human body, mocking Kanzaki for leaving such an object behind when he wanted to raise him as a human. That pisses Jin off, but even at full rage, he can't scratch Haitani. Right as the creep prepares to pierce Jin with the red stake, Alpha swoops in like the FBI and barely misses his window to take out the mastermind. While Haitani is disappointed that Jiro's entire plan went up in flames, the whole world and his mother see Kuga take Jin's side. Jin tells Kuga to retrieve the stake because it is the red stone in a different form. Suddenly, Kuga's father orders him to kill the demon in his arms, but Kuga flips the script by aiming his gun straight at his own deadbeat dad. Even as Jin tries to talk him down, Kuga declares he has to eliminate the root of it first to stop all this madness. Furious, his father commands the troops to mow down Alphas, and his suit flashes a warning as the SWAT team aim their guns at him. His father smugly reveals that Hayami made dozens of clones of him, so he is disposable trash and he can die along with his dumb superhero suit. Kuga breaks the moment his father insults Alphas and pulls the trigger, but out of nowhere his mother takes the first shot before he shoots his father a second time. Jin stares in disbelief, but Kuga rages and tells Haitani he's going down next for ruining humanity, but Haitani calls him a hypocrite because humanity brought it upon itself, and then orders more players to transform, announcing it is the players' time to run the game. After a giant explosion goes off in the building, Konoha arrives on the scene and begs Detective Sayama to let her in because she wants to see her family. Kuga watches as the players tear through the panicked mob and goes off to fight them off while Jin barely has the strength to even move. So Haitani throws him a bone and grins. White Alphas tries his best to save the civilians but keeps taking more damage than his suit can handle. The sweaty scientists detect that his suit's limiter will turn on from the serious damage he is taking and it will be game over for him. But the girl demands to know why they are worried about the suit while Kuga is having a mental breakdown after shooting both his parents with his own hands. While the player keeps tossing Kuga around with his bombs, Konoha shows up at the absolute worst time. Jin shouts at her to stay back and Haitani keeps tearing into him, saying he'll lose everyone he loves because he's a weak loser unless he embraces his final form. He keeps pressuring Jin to use the stake and become Zetman, the enemy of mankind. Kuga freezes in shock after hearing Zetman is an enemy of humanity, and Haitani keeps trying to brainwash Jin by insisting humans are evil by nature and will never treat players as equals, so the only solution is for Jin to transform and end their insufferable existence. Kuga warns his best friend not to use the stake because the piece of trash probably tampered with the red stone and tries to stop him while fending off the players. But Haitani pushes him off the edge as one of his lackeys drags Hanako into the scene and tells her she'll get to watch Jin die. The sleazebag mocks Jin and asks if he really thinks he can save his precious hostage and the humans without transforming, and Jin grabs the stake while swearing he'll wipe out every last player, playing right into Haitani's plan. Just before driving the stake into himself, he tells Kuga to finish him off if he loses control. Then he stabs himself and his body instantly reacts, transforming into White Zet and unleashing a nuclear shockwave that spreads throughout the city as he reaches his true form. Haitani grins in satisfaction and Kuga raises his gun at his best friend, but Jin says he feels better than ever and turns to Hanako. Suddenly, the ring on his finger bursts with a blinding light that gives the reporters, including Hanako, some serious headaches. That's when Haitani finally reveals his true plan and declares the players are now truly free. He reverts to his real form, but Jin stands there stunned seeing Hanako scream for help right before she starts transforming. Haitini explains that the ring in Jin's final form forces all players nearby to revert permanently, with no way of turning human again. As Haitani slaughters the last remaining humans and fights with Kuga, Hanako panics and every human she touches with her tentacles instantly turns to sand. The mastermind then tries to break Jin completely, saying that Hanako will keep killing unless he puts her down himself and there will be no one left to save. Seeing the love of his life suffer as her last bit of humanity remains and hearing her cry out for him to save her tears, Jin apart from the inside, but Haitini reminds him there's no turning back once a player has been reverted, and just to break him even further, the mastermind reveals he planned their meeting from the very beginning. He says he used Hanako to teach him about humanity, and that her falling in love with him and dreaming of a family was a big beautiful lie, and Kanzaki tried to teach him that human hearts can be easily toyed with. But Jin refuses to accept it because he remembers the real lesson Gramps and Akemi taught him. He leaps at the white dude, but Haitini swats him back down to the ground, and right next to him, another human turns to sand from Hanako's touch. Haitini mocks Jin, saying if his job is to save humans, he really sucks at it, and should probably abort her already. That pisses him off hard, so Jin swerves behind Haitani and tears right through him with his fist. Meanwhile, Kuga's team stresses out as the signal from his suit is still missing, when suddenly they receive a transmission from Amaji Labs asking about the situation because Chairman Mitsugai is on his way. Jin completely forgets Haitani as he watches Kuga fly straight toward Hanako and slice into her like a steak using Justice Blade. Watching his girlfriend go to the shadow mentally shatters Jin, while Haitani slips away and enjoys his pain scream which echoes throughout the building. The mastermind watches from a distance as Jin walks up to her and calls her name even though he knows she's long gone. Haitani tries to break him down while he's vulnerable, but Koopa shoots the scheming rascal away. None of the shots land though, and Haitani stuns him, saying he's actually grateful to him. Ignoring the lying prick, Koopa tries to slay him with Justice Blade but fails miserably. The mastermind claims Jin's face has never looked this dark before, and it's all because Koopa did what he never could and cut down Hanako, disappointing Konoha that her brother would take an innocent life. For that, Haitani thanks him with an energy blast that disables all his suit functions. In her final moments, Koopa's mother assures Konoha that he did nothing wrong. Seeing Koopa's limiter turn off mid-fight, the nerd squad panics while Konoha yells at him to run before she loses the only family she has left. Haitani laughs right before trying to finish him off, and Konoha begs him to forget his stupid justice. Jin pulls himself together just in time and grabs Alpha's sword, making Haitani smirk, thinking he's about to finish off the delusional fool who killed Hanako. But Jin pulls an Uno reverse and slashes at Haitani instead. Even with the Justice Blade impaled through his chest, the maniac laughs as he watches Jin's priceless expression. Jin yanks the sword out and knocks the madman toward the edge before slamming his fist through his heart again, yet Haitani still grins and says he's happy to die now that his job is complete. He makes his escape by collapsing the roof over Konoha, forcing Kuga and Kin to rescue her. After the dust settles, Jin coldly stares at Kuga, who's panting like a dog with asthma, and his team notes his body is way past its limit. Jin asks if he'd save anyone as long as they're human. Kuga stands by his decision, saying killing Hanako was the only way to save the others. Jin argues there might have been a way to save her too, but Koopa shouts that real heroes make painful calls because things don't always work out like the fire incident. Jin swears he'll save everyone, but Koopa removes his mask, and with his sweaty loser face he calls Jin the villain, saying his ring creates monsters, so he's left with only one choice. He charges at Jin like a crackhead tries to cut him down, but gets humbled and thrown to the ground. Pointing the gun at Jin's forehead, he swears he'll exact justice, and Jin gives him the green light. Konoha yells for them to stop, but Jin silences her with a cold stare, and after shaking like an old man with Parkinson's, Kuga pulls the trigger. 3 years go by since then, and even though many lives were lost that day, things have started to calm down aside from the stray players still lurking around. One night, Kuba flies in and quickly slays a player attacking a man, and the next day a news report covers the incident in which the man who was saved simps on live TV about how cool Alphys is. Another reporter mentions that even though many players are still in hiding, Alpha's mere presence is enough to make them think twice. Listening to the news in his Gucci office, Kuga hears the doorbell and his secretary lets in the pink-haired ex-fangirl who is now his wife. He shares his old man's wise words with her that if he wants to achieve true justice, he must gain real power. After finally making that dream a reality, he flashes back to 3 years ago. Back then, he couldn't pull the trigger on his best friend, and Jin quickly disarmed him. As he stands there ready to finish Kuga, Jin's Z cells go berserk and 2 devil wings sprout from his back. His body tries to attack Kuga again, but he fights against it and regains control and tells Kuga that if he hopes for a better future, he needs to aim for the sky instead of rolling in the dirt before jumping off. Kuga tries to go after him, but Konoha holds him back, and their grandfather arrives when they least expect it. Refusing to waste another second, Kuga rushes after Jin, But Mitsugai tells the whining man-child to take a chill pill, because he believes Jin will never harm humans because of Kanzaki's teachings that made his heart human, and that will overpower the player instincts inside of him. Back in the present, Kungu wonders if the reason the players are scared is because of Alphys, or do they fear Zet. He then asks his wife if he's truly on the path of justice, and she says he dishes out some fine justice every night. Meanwhile, Akemi joins Konoha and her mother in feeding the homeless, wishing Jin would call someday, and Detective Sayama assures them he's still on the case. Elsewhere, two guys harass a pair of girls on the street, only for Zetman to suddenly appear and save them. It turns out the girls were actually players luring in the scum of society. After tearing apart the monster thoughts, Jin stands atop a building where a sweeper tells him his master wants to meet. Jin laughs and says the clown would revert if he even got close, and that is the story of the hero maintaining peace from the shadows.